So, a common question that you're going to hear against Lutheranism and Lutheran theology is that they're nominalist. Martin Luther was a nominalist, and the Reform taught this nominalist view of justification and this legal fiction of forensic justification. And so, I just want to make a TikTok real quick and just kind of say, answer the question: Was Luther a nominalist? Was Luther a nominalist? No. So we see in his early writings, because people will say that he was a nominalist and that he was taught by nominalists and therefore he's a nominalist. However, we see in his early writings that that's not the case. We see that he's more of a Platonist, and he talks about this union with God and the masks of God and how God works through all these things, and how there is this idea of theosis that we have in Lutheran theology, which wouldn't work if we didn't have this nominalist idea. We also talk about how the incarnation is like a very key point of justification, which wouldn't work under a nominalist framework because of how nominalism frames itself and particulars and universals and essences. We do see also he critiques scholasticism a lot, and it's not like the Thomas Aquinas scholasticism. He wouldn't be very familiar with that. He's familiar with like people like Occam and Balin. Balin. Okay. I forgot the guy's name. Cut me some slack. But if you know who I'm talking about, I know who I'm talking about. Like these very famous, prominent nominalist philosophers about the medieval era, and he critiques them in a lot of his philosophical theses on critiquing scholasticism or in the Heidelberg writings, and talking about like the philosophical thesis is there. He critiques a lot of nominalist scholasticism because that's what he. Oh, it's Bile, by the way. I just remember it's Bile, whatever you want to say, Beale. But he critiques a lot of that nominalist philosophy because that is not what Luther believed. And even then, you have later Lutheran theologians like Martin Chemnitz and Johann Gerhardt that talk a lot about using more Aristotelian categories and Platonic categories when talking about God and the Trinity and the Incarnation, because that's what we use. Now, it is true, because Luther was taught by nominalists, that he did use nominalist categories to talk about things like the sacraments and the sacramental unity, and to kind of show that Christ, and to really emphasize how important it was with Christ and his human nature and the divine nature within the sacraments and things like that. So he does use a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but he does use nominalist categories. However, within saying that, he, whenever talking about things like justification or the union and things like that, he uses a lot more Platonic categories, which would be the opposite of what a nominalist would be, with heavy emphasis on the essence. But later in his career, he kind of stops talking about philosophy and things like that, and he goes more back into the scriptures. But if we were to force Martin Luther to have a set belief and a set metaphysical system, it would be more Platonism than it would be a nominalist philosophy. Thank you. God bless. Have a good night.